Friends, do you know what is the difference between settlement and joint note? Do you know why IBA is claiming that it is not amenable to writ petitions? Do you know why CPC is not applicable to bankers according to IBA? You will get the answers if you go through the counter affidavit filed by IBA in Madras High Court in the writ petition filed by a retired banker. All of us know there is a writ filed by Mr. Alex, retired Canara Bank manager in Madras High Court. The respondents in this case are Secretary DFS Ministry of Finance, the Chief Labour Commissioner Central, IBA and IBO. The case is now adjourned to 28th October for next hearing. The IBA, the third respondent in the writ, has filed their counter affidavit on 21st October in the court. In this affidavit, they have stated the following, which throws light on the IBA's stand in the issues which we have been discussing for some time now. The contents of the affidavit assumes utmost importance and relevance for the bankers because the arguments placed by IBA here will be equally applicable in the case filed by we bankers in Allahabad High Court also. So let's see what is the IBA stand in the main issues raised by the petitioner in the Madras High Court petition. To begin with, the IBA submits to the Honorable Court that it is not amenable to writ petition. The reason is that IBA is not an institution of the government or a quasi-governmental body. It's an unregistered body who does not receive any grant from the Government of India. Incidentally, in a legal circular issued by IBA on 30th September 2019, that is last year, IBA says that it is merely a voluntary association of banks and other financial service players. It is not a regulator and not even a self-regulator or self-regulatory organization. It does not have any authority over banks or other financial institutions and it cannot issue any directions to them. So, IBA has submitted that it is not a state under Article 12 to be amenable to the writ jurisdiction of the Honorable Court. This fact was upheld by Mumbai High Court in the judgment in the case of Kishore S. Bhatt versus Indian Banks Association in 2018. Therefore, the writ petition against IBA is not maintainable. This is the argument of IBA in this case, which will be equally applicable even in the petition filed by we bankers in Allahabad High Court. Then, what is IBA's role in the wage revision negotiations of bank employees? IBA has now more than 240 members including public sector banks, private sector banks and some foreign banks. The negotiation for wage revision of bank employees who are referred to as workmen take place between the negotiating committee comprising such banks on the one side and the workmen's unions on the other side where IBA acts as a facilitator. Therefore, IBA's role is only that of a facilitator. The banks give an authorization to IBA to facilitate negotiations with the union who submit a charter of demand and come to a settlement. IBA has till date facilitated 10 settlements. The number of banks giving authorization to IBA varies in each settlement. For example, in the 9th settlement, the mandate was given by 46 banks and in the 10th settlement by 43 banks. Presently, IBA is in the process of negotiating the 11th settlement for which 35 banks have given the authorization. Similarly, there are also officers associations or federations in the banks who protect the interests of the officers. They also submit their charter of demands. When these demands are placed, such banks also give a mandate to IBA to facilitate talks with the officers' associations with regard to their demands. Based on such authorization, the IBA facilitates talks between the banks and the associations and arrive at an understanding on all terms of employment and service conditions. As officers are not called employees, settlement is not entered with them. unlike in the case of employees where a settlement is entered into. Instead, a joint note is signed to reflect the understanding by the negotiation committee comprising of the said banks, IBA and officers associations. And all such banks which had authorized IBA to facilitate negotiation stand by the joint note. In short, settlement is in the case of workmen, and in the case of officers it is joint note which is facilitated by IBA. But what is important here is that IBA also adds that legally speaking such joint notes, unlike settlements, do not have any statutory force. This is a very important point. Now let's see what is the IBA stand on CPC, that is application of the 7th Central Pay Commission recommendations in banking sector. The settlements and joint notes entered into by IBA are pertaining not only to nationalized banks and public sector banks. It is also applicable for some private banks and even for certain foreign banks. Therefore, the CPC, that is Central Pay Commission, cannot be considered for banking sector as a whole. Moreover, the wages and service conditions of employees and officers in the said banks for the last more than 50 years have been governed by settlements and joint notes. If the settlements are now abolished, it will bring the entire banking industry to a standstill. As on date, the IBA is representing 18 public sector banks, 10 private sector banks and 7 foreign banks. It could prejudice the interests of the lakhs of employees working in the banking industry, and if any interim injunction is granted, it will cause irreparable loss to the employees of the banking industry as a whole. These are some of the vital points given in the counter affidavit filed by the Indian Banks Association in the writ filed in Madras High Court.